And we're back with me, Johnny McMurray, on the On the Spot Football Podcast with yet another fantastic guest. This guy is the front runner for everything football in Northern Ireland. He's a presenter, a commentator, a podcaster, and he's here on the spot with me, Michael. Michael, how are you?
First of all, what a great introduction.
You
Thank you
that?
so much.
That's after Alan. I was on the spot. I was sweating a wee bit there. I was trying to get that
Did you
out.
do a big build-up before we started?
I don't know why I done that. I was panicking a wee bit now, to be honest.
Well, you've got it the bus and nailed it.
I think I've done well there. I've rehearsed that and then we're a couple of times. Mate, thank you so much for coming on.
No, it's a real pleasure. You've been doing brilliantly, so congratulations.
Thank you. This all comes from actually your conversations that we had back after the knee surgery, and we had quite a long chat with you on your podcast and what was going to happen and what you think should happen and could happen, and it's materialised. Thank you for all your advice. It's probably one of the main things that I have done here.
Oh, not a problem at all. It's just really good to see you taking something positive out of something that's really tough. And I don't know, people probably don't appreciate all the things that come with a serious injury. Like the physical part of it's only one component.
Yeah. So
for you to not just sit around and feel sorry for yourself and turn this into something where so many people have come on and shared their stories and then other people get things from that, you've turned it into a massive plus. So that's a credit to you.
Yeah, no, it's been brilliant. The only positive thing out of it is I get to spend every day with my dad talking about the podcast and he has no idea what's going on half the time. So it's great. I bring him, he sits behind you. You've obviously had the joys of meeting Rob, and the most of you guys have probably all met Rob too now. So he absolutely loves it. So these wee things kind of come into play and it's been nice.
No, it's lovely to be here today, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you're going to ask me.
Yes, well, this is it. We're going to get down to the nitty gritty, but obviously you've been listening to the podcast. You kind of understand the way it goes. And one of the main reasons I bring people on is because I have a serious interest in things that you've done. And I have the utmost respect for you and what you have done and where I kind of want to go, and looking at somebody who's already there doing that sort of thing. So I need to strip it right back. So I need to understand, who is Michael Clarke? How did Michael Clarke get started? And we'll take it slowly from there. So who is Michael Clarke and how did Michael Clarke get started in this crazy world?
Well, when I got started, I was 15. It wasn't as a football commentator, it was as a radio presenter. And really even going back a little bit before that, the summer of 2005, there was a community radio station started up in Carrickfergus, which is where I'm from, and my dad was helping to run it. So there have been stations in the town running it during the summer and at Christmas for a few years, and for whatever reason, this particular year they couldn't come back. So the council asked my dad, would he know anything about running the radio station? He says, not really. He was just one of the sponsors of the previous one, but he got people involved that were working in radio for different sort of big stations in Belfast and whatever. And so I heard this was starting up and he was involved in it. And I genuinely just said, can I go in and see what they do? I didn't know anything about there being a future in it or anything like that. I just was nosy.
Yeah.
And I said, I'll make the teas, I'll make the coffees. And he was like, you've never made a cup of tea or coffee for me?
Yeah.
Well, it's probably a fair comment. But I went in and spent a month or so behind the scenes just kind of watching other people have a lot of fun, and I was invited on to speak a couple of times, and that's really where I got the bug for broadcasting and was like, this is kind of like playing, except it could maybe be a job.
Yeah.
So that was my entry into it. But in terms of football commentary, you actually go back to my childhood when I was playing the FIFA games on the Sega Mega Drive, really aging myself here. There were no commentators on those early games, so I was doing it. And I'm not saying I was doing a good job, but I was trying. And to the point where my dad would come home from work and say the neighbours want to know what the full-time score was.
Yeah.
Because it was just making a lot of noise.
Yeah. When you think about that, though, it is something so small. Back in the day, there was no commentary until maybe later on, but every kid has picked the player that they wanted to be, whether they're playing in the street or they're playing sort of FIFA or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And all they shout about and scream about is how they want to be that player and they're playing for this team. And it is quite a strange way to think about that. Is an early sort of start for everybody in that sort of...
And I remember being really excited in a toy shop when they were showing a demo for a new FIFA that had commentary in it. And I don't know how many kids were really crying out for that. There might have been teenagers and adults, but I just remember thinking, this is brilliant. So probably growing up and listening to a lot of radio made me really appreciate the commentary. Yeah. Because without it, you'd be lost.
Even now, sorry to jump in there, but I couldn't watch a football game without commentary. I can't, like, whenever you go into a bar sometimes and there's a mixed crowd and certain people don't want the football on, but it's on in the background.
Yeah.
I hate that. Like,
Yeah.
I need to have
When
somebody
they've got
talking.
music playing.
Yes, I don't like it because it just doesn't correlate with what's
Yeah.
happening, and you're that focused on it that you're like I need somebody to be sort of telling me as well. Like, I like hearing that side of it, and I think that's probably what sparked our conversations at the start. And it's a huge interest in me on how people do it, and the amount that goes into it is one of the biggest aspects of it, which we've spoke about. And I want to get that understanding, and I want people who are listening to this today to understand the background work that goes into just being in that production room, talking live, and what it actually entails, because it's not straightforward.
No, and it takes a lot of time to even just kind of find your style, and people say about finding your voice, but it's just about being as authentic as you can be when you're on air. Not that you would have ever gone on and lied, but there's an element of when you start anything new, you're kind of copying what you think you're meant to do, what you've seen or heard other people do, and nerves kick in. So maybe if you're on TV, you talk too much.
Yeah.
On radio, you can keep talking and talking, and you need to. Obviously, it's two different disciplines, radio and television, but if you just think of television first, you need to know when to shut up. That's actually one of the great skills. And sometimes people don't realise that a good bit of commentary is just the commentator pausing and letting the sound of the crowd reacting to a great goal.
Yeah, just giving them that sort of buzz that they can feel what's happening, that ambience on the ground.
Exactly that.
And trying to be a part of it.
And that sort of stuff takes time because, as I say, I started in radio and, you know, I was thrown in my early 20s and it was an amazing experience. April 2012 was my first game for Sports Sound in Radio Ulster, and it was a Ballymena Carrick Rangers match. Jay Costello got a hat-trick, Ballymena tanked Carrick. That was my first game at the Showgrounds towards the end of that season. I'd done a couple of dummy games which were I was sent out to shadow someone, and at half-time and full-time I recorded a report using all the equipment, but it wasn't broadcast, and they basically decided whether I was going to get a chance or not to do it properly. So that was the litmus test early doors, but my first proper game was my hometown team getting smashed, and I had to go on the radio and sound thrilled about it. So I guess because it didn't burst into tears, they're like, right, maybe this kid can come back next season.
Yeah.
But the radio side, you know, yes, you can talk all the time, but you have to be talking about the relevant things and be really descriptive and to be correct and precise with your language. But TV's a different beast because it's nearly stripping it back and finding a way to turn a paragraph into a sentence.
Yeah, I get those one-liners, which we spoke about Jackie there before. He's great at. He always had these little sort of sayings or phrases that he would use, and they always seem to work.
Yeah.
And maybe trying to find those things is harder than what you would think.
Because on radio, I can't just say, look at that.
And
look at what do you do? Where is he? Near side, far side, right foot, left.
Very descriptive. Well, that's one of the things I wanted to ask you, and it's probably one of the first things that's up here. So obviously you got started in the industry quite young.
Mm-hmm.
At 15, you kind of make your debut, I think, in around 20.
Yeah.
How descriptive did you realise that being on the radio is compared to what you were used to beforehand?
Because I listened to so much of it on the radio, I don't think I had to change too much of myself to be on the radio. That felt really natural to me. I'd been working more or less 5 years in radio, albeit music programming and different things. And to me, that was this is how to be a commentator, as a radio commentator. That was my early idea of commentary. So it was more a bit later on when they started giving me TV chances. I mean, actually, it's nearly back to front because I got a chance to commentate at the Milk Cup, as it was then, Super Cup in I in 2010 because I won a BBC Talent Search. Okay. So my first commentary, now I think about it, for the BBC was on the red button. So it was a TV style commentary. So that was really weird.
And that was with Sir Jack as well, I think. He
was one of the judging panel. Yeah. So shout out to Jackie.
he looked after you.
And just great advice about saying, you know, speaking with confidence and with surnames of players from different countries if you're not sure, and if you can't quite get a word with the team to give you a steer on it, just say it with confidence and say it the same way throughout, and most people won't know. Yeah. So just try and go that way. Obviously you want to get it right, but you just helped me feel calm about it and not overthink. What if I make a mistake? You will make a mistake, so don't dwell on them. Yeah. That's human. And as long as you can keep going and have the right sort of spirit, I guess, throughout a game, because people want to hear somebody who's enthusiastic and knowledgeable, hopefully. Yeah. So the knowledgeable part comes with experience and doing all your homework, but enthusiasm is hopefully something that's just within you, and like you do, you love football, so when you talk about it, you don't have to fake it.
Yeah, exactly. One of the good things that I thought about having Jackie on as our first guest was obviously the insight. Obviously the insight, but I was obviously hell nervous speaking to him, and I've spoke to Jackie so many times.
Yeah.
But sitting in this capacity where you're across from someone and it's the first time you've done it, and he's so calm, and he talks and he pauses again, and then you're sitting going, do I talk? Do I not talk? And he jump in and he starts talking anyway, and he goes, you need to read the room, son, after it. And I was like, okay, so how do you do that? So even those little bits of advice to me, I was like, that's so smart. Like how you cue people, how their eye contact would be, or whatever it is. You got to look out for small details so you're not sort of jumping in. And then he did say, if you jump in, then you just got to go all in, because you can't retract back then because you've already stepped. So I really enjoyed Jackie's conversation, probably as much as maybe people didn't. But a lot of people have came on and obviously said that they understand who Jackie was back in the day from being on TV. But he had really helped me and give me that advice. And it's really appreciated because you take it with you.
He's incredible. So Jackie Fullerton is one of my heroes.
Yeah.
And there's no question about that. I remember watching, obviously he commentated up until a few years ago, but growing up watching Irish Cup finals and Jackie's voice on them and thinking, maybe one day I could do that, you know. And I put a post on social media before I did my first Irish Cup final commentary there a couple of months ago, just to say, you know, nearly for the little child in me as opposed to for anybody else's sake, that it's actually happening.
Yeah.
And Jackie was that reference point, because it's one of those careers that most people say, oh, there's no jobs in that, or you can never do that, get a sensible job. And I understand that. And it can be family members as well saying, well, where are your prospects? I never hear any jobs going in that. And it seems like a big, weird world that most people aren't in. So having someone with Jackie's know-how and all the years that he's done it, show a wee bit of belief in you and say, here's some of the mistakes that people make, maybe try avoid them.
Yeah.
Saves you a couple of years of heartache making them over and over again and not realising what isn't clicking for you. And yeah, interviews are always body language and actually listening. I know it sounds really obvious. A lot of these things sound obvious, but try them. Try be in your position today and do an interview and reading the room and understanding, is he holding back, or have they got a bit more to say, or do I need to kind of lighten this up, or what do I need to do next? And it comes from observing the person that you're up with it.
One of the big things that I took from Jackie was, it's not actually, as you say, it's about being quiet. Sometimes people use silence as like a way to talk more and end up getting to a further point that maybe they wouldn't have said because you would have jumped in on top. And I thought it was brilliant. I was like, great, I'm going to try and sit as quiet as possible, because you want people to go into the detail that the fans and the viewers want to see, especially if they're trying to talk about something in their life or mental health or whatever it is that most of the people have kind of reached on here. But it's advice that I thought I would never get or never needed, especially when you're starting something completely new.
Yeah.
It's kind of great to have somebody like that in your corner, and I think he said that was probably his last interview, so I'm very privileged to be able to say I appreciate that, do you know what I mean?
And sometimes short questions work really well. It's a really, or in what way? And it just allows people to expand on something. You don't need to, one of my pet hates, and I probably did it when I was younger, and I hope I don't do it as much now, is you nearly try and show off how much you know in your question. You know, well, obviously, someone your experience, and the question, by the time it's finished being asked, the other person's half asleep. You know, what was the question again?
Yeah.
Because it's going on. So you always want to try and just hear from your subject and not so much of yourself.
Talk to me about you being in the radio. What sort of setup is a radio station when you're speaking about the radio, the games that come through to you live, and you're constantly updating? Mm-hmm. Is that a situation where you're in there by yourself, or is there other people with you? And do you just get an update and you just have to change from update to update, or how does that work? Because I've never been in that situation before.
Yeah, presenting Sports Sound, it's a crazy operation in many ways. It's a small, hardcore team of people that work very fast, and so you're in the studio. You might have a guest in with you. You've got your producer and a couple of other people in the next room. You can see them through a glass window. And sometimes it's the producer saying to me, Michael, we need to go to this game. This is what, there's been a goal at Crusaders, whatever. And then it's a case of saying what the game is and who the reporter or commentator is and getting to them. Sometimes it comes up on the screen, but to be honest with you, it's a myriad of things. I will have multiple tabs going trying to follow it. In the studio, we have screens showing our cameras at the different games.
Right, okay.
So sometimes I see something and I have a button which I can use to talk to the producer without the audience hearing.
Okay.
And I might be saying, what's going on there? Can we go to that? Or I might be being told. So it really does depend. Plus, obviously, they, as the producers, can hear what the reporters are saying at any moment. Yeah. So they could be calling out as well, saying, we've got a goal here, it's 2-0, or there's been a red card or whatever. And then we quickly pivot what we're doing. And from the other side of it, if you're a commentator out at the ground and you're the lead commentator, whilst you're commentating, whilst you're listening to your co-commentator, paying attention to what's on the pitch in front of you, you have a voice in your head, which is your producer saying, I need you as quickly as possible to get to Windsor. There's been a big talking point. And you're going, oh, right, okay.
So see, whenever you're doing that, are you able to use the commentators for the live show? Like, can what they say be used on the radio as a live thing, or is it all you?
So from a sports sound perspective, during the 90 minutes, it'll usually be the commentator that's on.
Okay.
So the presenter's on in the build-up to a match kicking off, at halftime, and after the games have finished.
Okay. And
so we're either building up to the games, kind of summarising what's been going on, could be potentially talking about some other sports stories in the break, or afterwards doing interviews with people and getting a reaction. So they won't come to us during the matches, so the commentators really and the producers are working hard to try and bounce around the ground to keep the listeners up to date. But I'm not sitting, say I'm presenting it.
You're not just sitting
I'm not sitting there with a cup of tea. I'm going, right, I need to get all the goal scores. I need to have the scores. I need to know what they mean.
Yeah.
In terms of, because I'll have done preparation to know the significance of results. No point going like, oh, Team A are beating Team B at halftime. Yeah. No, this could knock them out of European place. It might actually push them one step closer to relegation. It might prevent them from finishing above somebody else, whatever. Yeah. You need to know your permutations, especially towards the end of the season. At the beginning of the season, you need to kind of not get carried away. You know, at the beginning of the season,
yes,
you'll get a freak result, and people are like, "Oh, they're going to run away with it this year, and this team are toast." You know, why would you ever commit yourself to that in September when it's 3 points?
Exactly, and there's another 20 or 30 odd games to play, and
but a young reporter could make that mistake, and I'm sure I did when I was starting out.
It's probably just more of like, get it out there. You're excited. You're like, this is what could happen. Can't believe they actually beat these, and you're sitting going like, freak results happen.
Yeah, and as a player, you probably, if you were listening to that, you'd be thinking, what's he on about?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? We'll win next week. It's fine.
Yeah.
What crisis? But
as you say, from a young person who probably hasn't had that experience, they're probably like, this is great.
Yeah.
And I can get to talk about this, and
you know, and maybe, I'm going to get more time on the radio because I've had a freak result and everyone wants to hear what's going on, so I'm going to make it sound amazing. But, you know, is it reality? So the thing that you always have to try and remember is when you're doing any sort of reporting, it's not for you, it's for the audience. So explain it as clearly as you can. And my dad actually said a great thing to me when I was starting out. He said it's broadcasting. So make sure that your message can be understood by as many people as possible. It's meant to be cast broadly.
Yeah.
So you don't need to throw in loads of big words to tell everyone that you went to university. You know, you're not trying to show off. You're trying to make sure everybody understands what's happened. And for that, then you don't need to exaggerate. You know, not everything is amazing, great, fantastic, wonderful the first time ever. Sometimes it's just, this is what happened.
Yeah.
You know?
How do you move on from there? So I know you've done sports sound, you've also worked for the BBC. You've done a lot of stuff on TV as well. You've obviously done other radio stuff. How does it come about, the opportunities wise?
Yeah.
How do you actually get picked up then to go, I've done this little bit in Carrick.
Yeah.
And I've started off and I've done this probably for a few years now, and then all of a sudden you make the steps up.
Yeah.
How does that come around?
There's no one way to do it, but I think it's practice makes perfect and making contacts with people. So I always say to people, your dream employer can't give you a job if they don't know you exist.
Yeah.
So how do you put yourself in front of that person? And I'm not saying it's easy. You could email people with amazing show reels that you've made up and you're really proud of them and you don't get a response. That has happened to me more than once. You might have a chat with someone and think, flip, that's a really good conversation. Oh, here's your phone number. Phone me anytime and I'll give you... And maybe that person never picks up the phone call.
Yeah.
So there's loads of things like that. So you need to be persistent if you want to be successful. I don't think that's just our careers, you know, I think that's in life. But in terms of me, I was working in that station in Carrick, summer, Christmas, all throughout the end of secondary school, university. I got into U105, was working there for a while with a lot of the presenters, but I was particularly working with Ivan Martin on Sundays, behind the scenes in his show, and that was amazing. And Ivan played a little part in getting me into the BBC, but I didn't know that. So I'd won the BBC talent search whilst I was still doing stuff at U105, and gone and done the commentaries, and always bending Ivan's ear. You know, how do I do this? How do I do this? And unbeknownst to me, he'd had a word with Brian Johnston, who he's good friends with, who for many years was the producer of Sports Sound, a legendary producer, and ultimately the man that gave me my break in the BBC properly. So he helped me get in there. Now, I'd been doing other wee bits and pieces, and so 2010 I won the talent search. 2011 I got into a thing called Aim High, which was 20 people selected out of like 700 applicants. It was like the X Factor for working in the media.
Right, okay.
Honestly,
Good way to put it.
It was mental. We were doing...
You didn't have this thing though, did you?
No. Well, no, we had tests to do. One of the first things we got put in a room with all the other people that, well, not all of them, but a lot of the people that were trying to get it. And because you were split into groups and you were given scenarios and you had to get up and present your idea in front of all these people that you're competing against. Right. And it was quite intimidating. Yeah. You had interviews, you had all these things, and 20 of us got taken away to England and come back from that. And actually, if you don't mind, like, it's probably a good lesson in it, is I'd spent a week or 10 days, whatever it was, in that place, Evesham, being told by all these people, you're really good at this, you're doing really, really well. And so you're going, class. Well, there's meant to be placements at the end of it.
What's going to happen?
Feeling good about maybe getting one. So you get home and went out for a meal in Carrick. I remember Springsteen's. Other restaurants are available. Was in Springsteen's in Carrick Fergus. The phone rang, and it was one of the coaches. And I thought, here we go. So I went and stood outside. I was just finishing our dinner up, and got a phone call and going, well, how's it going? Yes, look, you did brilliantly, but we don't think we're going to give you a placement. And I was floored. So I was 21, had been up until that point, everything just felt like it was falling for me. Entered a massive BBC talent search, I won it. Entered this opportunity again where people from all across the UK were going for it. It wasn't just Northern Ireland. And I got in. What do you mean I'm not even getting a placement? Sure, loads of them are. So it was a sort of a tough one to swallow. And they didn't really say that I did anything wrong. It was just like, come along to the Belfast Media Festival in a week or two, and I'm sure we'll see you there. And I wasn't for going at all. I just completely hands up, ego took a hit, and I was thinking, I don't know that I want to go to this and look at people who have been successful when I have not been successful. I think it's a bit raw. And my dad pretty much said to me, you're going, and you're going to go and you're going to ask, what could I have done better? And have you any advice for me? And I went, and one of the first people that saw me congratulated me on getting in, and I had to tell them, actually, I haven't. And then they ran away quite quickly.
That wee knife was in there. Like,
I was like, this isn't the best day so far. I'm sure I want to be here. But I spoke to one of the coaches, and they said, look, you made it really clear you wanted to be on air. You want to be a presenter or a reporter. We haven't got any placements in that. There are people here that want to work in production and television, and maybe drama. And they're going to be working with the scripts, they're going to be working with the microphones, they're going to be working with the cameras or whatever. We don't see you wanting to do that, really. And I said, I don't. Actually, that's you'd have been taking someone's opportunity off them, and that wouldn't be right. I hadn't even considered that. I was so wrapped up in myself and my rejection as I perceived it. So they said, what we can do is I'll introduce you to a couple of people. One was William Crawley, who I'm very grateful to. He presents Talkback now on Radio Ulster, but he was at that point presenting Sunday Sequence, which obviously was on a Sunday. And also a guy called Michael Tumulty, who at that point was the big boss of Radio Foyle. Okay. And through conversations with them, they pretty much opened the door to come in and start doing newspaper reviews. So by the time that Ivan was speaking to Brian, I wasn't just some kid that was answering the phone in U105. I was already doing bits and pieces on air in the BBC, not necessarily in the area that I wanted, but just to try and get my foot in the door. So he was able to listen and go, okay, he sounds all right, we'll give him a test. So it's a long answer, but I guess the short version of it is you have to be doing loads of things to get that bit of luck. People say right place, right time, but what
Of
part of that
people
was,
that will work,
you know?
but the majority of people will have to actually go and physically get that opportunity.
You know, so I've joined the dots with Brian whilst I was in the BBC doing something else. And I used to laugh because on a Sunday morning, I could be in doing the newspapers with William, and you could be talking about anything, really serious stuff in the newspapers, and coming out the door of the BBC and going around the corner into Havelock House, as it was then for U105, and going up and working with Ivan for the next couple of hours. And I was like, I don't know if too many people are doing that. Going from BBC to the UTV building, you know, straight away within 20 minutes. But that was me for, you know, a couple of years until I established myself.
Yeah. But you quite quickly actually establish yourself, and then I think you actually get your own TV show, your own show, not TV show, your own radio show off the back of it. So for you to go to where you were, I think that you're getting this, to have the hint to then go back up, straight away, progress yourself to your own show, doesn't really happen very often, to be honest.
No, and like simultaneous to this, because I you know, announced last year I'm leaving my job and I'm going fully freelance and I'll be my own boss, and the year anniversary's just come up with that. And a lot of people are like, you're leaving the BBC? I went, well, no, the BBC aren't actually my day job. I was managing a community radio station in Lisburn for over a decade, and so I was presenting programmes and that. And for some people, the only thing that they knew about it was I did a programme called The Score, and they probably didn't know where they were getting it. They were just going on to Spotify or somewhere afterwards. And but obviously, if you're listening in the Lisburn area, hopefully you were listening to that station and enjoying it, because I put a lot of love into it for a long time. But so I was doing that Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, and then picking up all the other stuff with the BBC and maybe some stuff with U105 and whoever else was interested. So where do the opportunities come from? In the early part of my career, I was just trying to make a name for myself, and I probably wasn't reaching out to too many people.
Yeah,
I was just doing things, was somewhere, someone went, you're doing that, can you do this? Oh, you're doing that, can you do this? Like how I got into TV commentary for the BBC was a fluke. I was presenting something for the Northern Ireland Football League at the start of the season. I've been a radio commentator for a few years, and when I'm at the front of a room, to this day, I will try and find a friendly face or two in the audience to make me feel calm. So people are like, oh, you're so relaxed. You get butterflies. You do.
100%. Nerves always kick in, regardless of what you're doing. Absolutely.
You know, and I'm sure as a footballer, you manage it differently as you get more experience, but it doesn't just go away.
No, you still have it, because you still know that as soon as you mess up, it's still going to be there. So
your feedback's very immediate.
Do you know what I mean? It's like, you know what, you haven't done this, or this happened in the middle of a game even, and you're sitting going like, people always let you know that you've done the wrong thing. So even though people see you as this confident, outgoing person, as soon as you do something wrong, very quickly to jump the opposite side. So I was looking down the room, and there was a woman down the back left-hand side who was smiling and nodding anything I said. When I told a joke, even if it wasn't funny, she was laughing and going, love you, you're brilliant. Just you stay there, I'm going to feel 10 foot tall during this. So at the end of it, because I think it had gone well, I went to try and find her, and I couldn't find her anywhere, and someone went, she was down beside your man there. She's away, I think, raging. A couple of weeks later, I was in the BBC getting my equipment to go out and do a match, and she was sitting beside Brian. I was like, you're the woman from the event the other week. And it's like, this is like the executive of television sport, Michael, for BBC. How did you not know that? I'm like, sorry. And Margaret O'Hare, and Mags is just retired. But I was like, all right. And I was like, I was trying to find you the other week to say thank you for being really encouraging and smiley, because you kind of helped me get through feeling a wee bit nervous. And she said, well, you did really well. Why have you never done any television for me? And I said, you never asked me. Yeah. I was probably quite cheeky, to be honest. But people like that too, though. That's probably been like, fuck, I like that. Yeah. And she went, well, we'll change that. We'll get you on Final Score in a couple of weeks. Brilliant. And that was really, you know, the early opportunity doing the Milk Cup games was great, but that was really where TV commentary started for me, and probably where maybe I started to grow in a bit more profile, because people started to see you more. Yeah. You're around the grounds more, you're doing more high profiles, interviews even. You start to get better names and all that sort of stuff, and that's when people start saying weird things like, where do I know your voice? Yeah. Well, to be honest, it is a very recognisable voice. There's a few recognisable voices actually that I've came across. Yours is one, Jackie's is the other, and Mr. Taggart is the other. Yeah. He has a voice, like, I don't want to say he's a good looking fella or anything, because he'll eat me off this, do you know what I mean? He'll be buzzing. But his voice is so distinctive. Yeah. Even when he does the hosting or the presenting, he does it like the testimonials and different things
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
You're like, your voice, you just know that that's him.
Yeah.
And yours is very similar to that. And I think from being around, obviously, in the background, you're listening to games or you're at games and you can hear different things, even the Irish Cup final.
People get
You know what I mean?
so familiar with you because you're in their house or in their car, wherever they're listening or watching.
Not literally, by the way.
No, I don't do that.
That's
That's not a new service. Now that I'm freelance, I could do with the extra
does maintenance. You could say.
Could you imagine that? I will commentate in your FIFA games. Have you? Yeah, no.
Sitting in the corner.
Leave me alone. I don't want to read that message on Twitter later. But no, it's just it's a funny thing where people get used to listening to you and hearing you talk, and then I'm sure it happens to you. People come up to you and talk like they've known you forever, and you've maybe never met them before.
Yeah.
And you just kind of roll with it. And sometimes I'm like, have I forgotten that person's name? I'm constantly paranoid.
Yeah.
I'm like, have I forgotten that person? Because I'm good with faces.
Yeah. So I'm good with faces too, but I've got this days now where just say, all right, sir. Or they're like, and try and make myself feel
keeping all right.
formal. And they're like, you never say sorry. And I'm like, I only say, because I can't remember your name.
Yeah. There was a story about Hulk Hogan. Hey, brother.
Yeah.
Apparently that came from that kind of thing where he became obviously like ridiculously famous.
Yeah.
And everyone was like, Hulkster, and he didn't know what to do, so he just started calling everyone brother.
Do you know what? Smart.
Our version's like, all right, mate.
The only thing is, then you wait until you're mate and you go, do you know his name?
Yeah.
And then you're like, who is that? Stephen. You're like, oh, Stephen, great. No, it was Stephen. But what I want to get to now is you kind of touched on the overall aspect of your sort of career.
Yeah.
And one of the big things that excites me about everything that you do is the football aspect of it. And that's the main reason why I have you on.
Mm-hmm.
Where you've got to now is kind of like at that pinnacle, because you've done every type of game pretty much under the sun at the minute, especially in Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
Right. Talk to me about how you prepare, how you kind of get into these situations and how you're ready for sort of live matches, being at different games like the Irish League, Northern Ireland, Irish Cup finals. You've done it all.
Well, thank you. I always think there's more to do, and I'm always trying to push myself on because I never want to be complacent. But the preparation, it's a full day's work. It's a minimum of 8 hours for a commentary, and that is going through everything. So if it's an Irish League game, it's slightly different because you get to a certain point in the season, you know the team's inside out. You probably know nearly all the players. So it's a different type of preparation. That could be more just trying to get your stats completely right. So they've scored 6 goals in their last 8 games or whatever. They're on a purple patch. Let's make sure we mention that. Or they always score against this team, or whatever the little quirk or the observation is. You want to have all of that down. You want to have information for every player. So there's 2 main columns basically on page 1, and there's usually 7 or 8 pages. But on page 1, there's 2 main columns, which is the home team, the away team, and then all the players in the squad.
Yeah. And
everyone gets information. I was going to say scribbled. I type it.
Right. Okay.
Which actually is funny because it disappoints some people because they really want to see like these handwritten notes. And I can't read my handwriting, so there's not a chance to you well. So my handwriting's awful. You'd think I was a doctor. So no, I type everything out, so it's a wee bit easier for me to read. And then I have columns outside of that where I can tick if they're playing, or put an X if they're not, or S if they're a sub. And outside of that, then it's just their numbers. So I put it in numerical order and then work from there. So it's, right, let's look at the squad, who's played how many games recently, etc., and try and build it on, right, well, if I can kind of get 20 players for each team or whatever the number is, that this is going to look about right. And then if they go, oh, well, they're not playing, they're injured.
Yeah.
Well, okay.
Fine, yeah.
But I need to know that.
Yeah.
You don't ever want to get the game. Someone goes, where's Johnny? Why is Johnny not playing? Oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm sure he got seriously injured. You know, it just completely undermines you as a commentator because you haven't done your homework.
Yeah.
So you're always trying to find out stuff. So you're sitting looking up the internet. There's different websites you can use to try and find out all those statistics. You'll go through head-to-heads. You'll go through all these things. And my second page is kind of like a breakdown of like stats or talking points for each team. So it becomes more like nearly narrative driven. Because if you think of through a match, you might want to in some ways introduce something to the conversation saying they haven't won their last 3 home games. Is there a bit of pressure coming in here? Or this team have been tremendous on the road. What is that? How do you do that? And it creates talking points with your co-commentator. So this is the sort of body of work that you do. And then for matches that are on the TV or the iPlayer, you've also got, with the BBC, Marshall Gillespie is resident stato. So
Well,
Marshall...
just to shout that, Marshall actually does a lot of work for us.
brilliant.
I've kind of acquainted with Marshall, and just I wasn't going to let anybody know, but it's about time people do know he's a genius.
Yeah.
Complete genius.
Yeah.
And he has everybody way back until like 1980.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Marshall and I, when we're on the phone with each other, I mean, usually we'll just try and exchange text messages for both of our sakes. Because if we get into a phone call, it takes hours, and you're like, this was definitely a 5-minute conversation. What have I've done no prep here, but I've remembered things and been taught things, and so we always have a great time sort of talking with it. But we'll go through it and go like, oh, how are you classing that as an assist, or what way are you doing that, and try and piece it all together, because I want you to watch, if I'm on TV, I want you to watch the game and know that anything I say to you that's a fact is a fact.
Yeah.
I don't want you to think about it. I don't want you to even doubt me.
Yeah.
And that's on me to prepare for that. It's not on you. So I'm always trying to make sure I get it right. And thankfully, nearly all the time, it is right. Of course, you're going to make the odd mistake. But it's a big undertaking, Johnny. I won't lie to you. And for international games, it's slightly different again. I was doing the Northern Ireland game against Poland in the women's internationals recently, Nations League, and very aware that Polish surnames can be difficult to pronounce.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of Polish people in Northern Ireland, and I thought, the last thing I want to do is offend you.
Yeah.
Your national team's actually available somewhere that you can watch, and you want to watch these players and feel a part of the programme too. So what I did was I contacted a Polish friend that I have, who is very, polyglot, speaks multiple languages, and she phonetically went through every single name and wrote it down beside, like, this is actually just how you say it.
Yeah. So like broke it down to the Belfast version of this, and then just hyphened it.
Exactly.
That's a smart way to do it, though.
So then when I'm saying the names and saying them hopefully quickly, saying them confidently, I'm also saying them close to correct. I'm not going to start putting on a Polish accent, because
that would be hilarious, by the way.
It'd be very funny. I think a lot of people would definitely pay attention.
Absolutely.
Get this game on right now.
You know what? Move him up to the net.
Your man's had a problem here, hasn't he? Because he thinks he's Polish. But at the same time, you want to try and get the accent, or sorry, the pronunciation of the accent. You want to get the pronunciation correct for those people. So that's a different layer to it again.
Yeah. How do you deal with, I was going to say actually about that, but the Irish League's probably very easy for you coming into terms with it, because you know every player near enough in every team. You've covered it, the ins and outs, the whole depth. When you go and do a game with people that you don't know, or as you say, with pronunciations, it's so difficult, because I've had that short period there with that little Northern Ireland team that you were with.
Mm-hmm.
Went into it blind and didn't know anybody's name, and
the first 10 minutes were scary, was it?
Absolutely hilarious for me and Stuart King, who were doing it, but it was nerve-wracking, because I was like, I don't know anyone.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you're like, imagine that was on live TV.
Yeah.
Like that would completely
well, that does happen.
Break me, to be honest. I'd be like, whoa, I'm out of my depth right now.
Oh, I've done games where someone's come off the bench and you're thinking, who's that kid?
Yeah.
Wasn't ready for them. Because you can get to the ground and there might be a name on the team sheet and you think, they'll probably not come on.
Yeah.
And then they do.
Young kid or something.
So, you have those experiences, and that's where you learn from it, and then you go the other end where you're like over-prepared. You get to the ground, you see a name on the team sheet, and sometimes the team sheets are handed to you late. So, I'm not digging out any media officers here, but, well, maybe
Alan's probably the worst, to be honest.
You get a team sheet maybe a bit late, and then you're going, I don't have time to go down and ask that manager, who is this?
Yeah. Because
they're in doing their team talk and they've got a game to prepare for.
See, to be honest, Alan would probably ignore you as well. He'd be like, I can't deal with you, Michael. We can't deal.
This is the final episode of
this. We'll not be back after this. Alan is going to pull all plugs. But no, as I say, it's very difficult whenever you get into that situation.
Yeah.
And people probably don't understand it, because the amount of detail you do go into, and you've touched on there, it's way beyond what anybody would expect someone to do.
Do you know what you can do when you get to a game? It's nearly gone the other way now. I'm going to sound like an old grumpy man, right? But it's kind of coming back in. People are now wearing black boots again. They've nearly become trendy, right? But it used to be everyone would wear black boots, and there'd be one wee fella with a pair of Bobby Dazzlers on it. And you're like, right, orange boots, stick that beside their name, because if you only know he's number 7 and he's down his back injured, and you're going, who is that? I can't see their face. They're on their back, can't see their number. Orange boots. There we are.
Yeah.
And you go down, you bang. How do you know that from so far away?
Yeah.
You know, there's just little things like that, or
that you can use.
Bleach blonde hair, or whatever the case may be, or just like a distinguishing feature.
Yeah.
And I used to do that all the time, especially when I wasn't familiar with players, and still sometimes to this day. The match that gives me like nearly like I'd wake up in a cold sweat sometimes still thinking about it is I did a Harry Cavan Cup final.
Okay.
And one of the teams, Glenavon, were wearing their white away strip with like the blue, but the numbers on the back were blue, and it kind of like faded into the blue on the back of their jersey. So basically I couldn't read the numbers, is what I'm trying to say to you. I'm like, well, all the best. Here comes 90 minutes of I know who one of the teams is. And it was really, I had the grab. So
why is he not saying anybody's name from Glenavon? This is so weird.
Yeah, well, why?
He obviously supports Carrick still.
Yeah, he obviously is rooting for it. Was against Dungannon. So Dungannon were in a yellow kit with blue on the back. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Nice and easy.
Yeah.
But that Glenavon kit, and the senior team wore it too, but the difference was I knew all the players.
Yeah.
So I was like, well, I know him, so it's all right.
Yeah.
So I did have a wee moan to Glenavon about it. I was like, please do something with that kit, because I can't flip and read it.
Yeah, or bring the kids up quicker.
Aye.
You know what I mean?
And the worst thing was, from memory, I think they had like triple digits. They were doing like the South American clubs do. You know, you're like playing for, you see those teams coming over in tournaments, and they're wearing like number 327 because that's his number through the club.
Yeah.
You're going, I dead on.
Yeah.
I don't need that in my life.
Come on, this is not.
You know, there's a 7 on the back. Is it 7, 17, 27, 37, blah, 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 207? No, anyway.
Anything over 37 is a criminal.
Isn't it?
They'd never get there.
So these sorts of things actually are what annoys me. And I had I know you've spoken to him recently, Desi Lockery, he's always going on and saying, get the numbers on the front of the shorts. When they're running towards me, I want the numbers. And I actually think he's got a point. Yeah. So I'm bringing it up everywhere for him. I'm not on commission. But if it happens, Desi...
I think Desi, probably by the time this is out, Desi's would have been released. This should be released on Monday or so. I'm hoping that everybody has really enjoyed themselves. But Desi's conversation was mental. He is so fully in it. He's 100 miles an hour.
Yes.
It was fantastic. I loved it. I was like, I'm creasing myself constantly here. It's just so good.
And he's a great storyteller.
He has a great way about him. Yeah. I think it's just because he's from maybe down that end of the town, and they're just that abrupt or forward, and they just don't really care either. They just want to get it out.
But he's also done everything, hasn't he, really? You know, now he's photographing the players, but he was a player and he refereed players.
Yeah.
So he's been on, you know, a couple of different sides of it, which just gives you a really unique insight.
Yeah. Well, that was the good thing about it. A lot of people have talked about him continuously on the podcast, saying Desi done this, and we had a lot of chat from him, and we liked him, and he was good as a referee, and it was just one of those things where I feel like your guests end up picking themselves after a while, where you're like, he's been suggested that much. It's maybe time to reach out and try to get him on. So it's quite an easy one, actually, and it turned out to be absolutely hilarious. So I was so happy with it, to be honest. But next, I want to move on. I want to talk about some of the big games that you've actually had the privilege of being a part of. Yeah. Because some people get to play in these games. Yeah. Luckily, I've had the chance to play in cup finals and win them, lose them, league titles, win them, losing them. You actually get to commentate on them from a different side of things.
Yeah.
How is that on the day, the whole day? Say, like, you recently done this year's Irish Cup.
Yeah. So if I take that as an example, it's just so, for me, it's exciting. Yeah. I get excited on a big day as well. And there's an element of don't mess this up. Yeah. And it's not like, if I do this badly, they'll never ask me again. It isn't that. It's just, I actually really want to do everybody justice on the day. So many players will say to you, we've watched that game back. You know, if it's a good day, if you've won your final, we've watched that game back so many times, or I've watched that goal back so many times, and I like the way he said this or whatever, or the odd time someone will say, why'd you say that about me? So you just want to try and get the tone right and nail it. So for me, I'm a terrible person for going to bed late.
Okay.
I am not go to bed early at all, and I don't sleep long enough probably either for most people's liking. Sort of 6 hours is about enough for me. But that's like, those things are the one time where I'm like, I know I need to go to bed early and be a big boy. I know I need my sleep. I know I need to eat right so I don't like just load myself in sugar and crash and feel lethargic halfway through the game. I know I need to get there really early because there's going to be more traffic. I know I want to spend time talking to people in the build up to the game. So the days before the game, not only am I doing my minimum 8 hours prep, I'm phoning people. Could be players, could be coaches, could be both. Asking them how they're feeling, what's the prep like, what's been going on. Maybe you find out something about actually we've had a sickness bug or we've had this or we've had that or we took them away, we did something quirky. And I always feel like it's my responsibility to try and bring you something as a viewer or listener that you haven't got anywhere else. There's no point in me just taking someone else's work and regurgitating it where I am. So you're always trying to do that. So you're getting there early. I always want to get up and test the equipment, make sure I know. Because if you're doing TV, like that game obviously was on BBC Two, there's a big crew that day. It's bigger than the iPlayer games. There's more goes into it. There's a lot of moving parts. So you just want to make sure you know, is this my talk back button? So you don't accidentally say something on air during a match and make a mug of yourself. You want to know, right, does this work? Are you happy with me here? How long have I got? On those days, you actually can get a wee meal as well. So you go and get your bite to eat. And then we've got our bottles of water in front of us.
Wow.
I'm like, no fizzy drinks, no sweeties, typically, because the last thing you want is to either have that horrible
like a
sound,
dry sort of mouth or something.
yeah, or even worse, to be full of wind.
Right, okay.
So there's all these.
The only person that's doing any damage there, you're killing Baxter next to you. You're Stevie's eating farts all day.
So he doesn't need that in his life. So, it's all these little weird bits of preparation, and I think different commentators have their own rituals about how long they sit. I think anyone that works with me will tell you probably an hour before a game, I'm starting to scribble, and I do handwrite stuff during a game. Other people bring iPads. I don't know why I like to write it before a game, but I might try and come up with a little synopsis of what I'm wanting to say right at the very start. And I would always put it across as it's not a script, it's a safety net.
Yeah. It's your kicking, you're not like people who take a penalty.
Yeah.
Like that's your way to set yourself up to continue on a nice.
So that's start strong, and then the football speaks for itself.
Yeah.
But you want to try and make sure you nail your points, or if there's stats or things that I want to weave into my opening bit, well then I just have them. Sometimes they're just bullet pointed. Yeah. Sometimes it's written out in sentences, just so that and I'm a lefty, just in case anyone's wondering why I'm scribbling to the camera. But just to try and make it stick in my brain as much as anything.
Yeah.
It's like a last minute cramming for a test, and then the match starts.
Do you, or have you, actually is probably the best way to say this, have you had any problems live?
Yes.
Talk to me about some of those problems.
Loads. All sorts of things. So one of the ones I was doing a game with Matthew Tipton, another previous guest of your pod. Me and Tippy were doing a game in Dungannon, I want to say, and everything was fine in the build up, and as soon as we went on to start doing the commentary, he made it like a signal to me, basically, I cannot hear you. And he's standing beside me, and I'm like, can you take an ear off and maybe just hear me that way? He's like, don't know what's going on here. There's something wrong with my equipment. I was like, oh. So I'm running through the team news. It's not his turn to speak yet, but he's doing the right thing and telling me there's a problem. So I am trying to follow the graphics on the screen so that I'm not giving you the away team when the home team graphics up, losing the run of myself. But I'm also having to try and speak to my producer off air and say, I need someone like to get round here quickly to fix this, because obviously it's meant to be both of us, and if he can't hear what I'm saying, it's going to be hard for him to actually come in on time and speak about anything. So I've had that happen where there's maybe a wee technical thing with the co-commentator, and there was a funny one at Inver Park I was doing a couple of years ago with Jim Magilton.
Okay.
And for whatever reason, in Jim's headset, he could hear the pitch side mics, so he could hear Tiernan and his coaches and everything they were saying.
Okay.
And they were just having a wee conversation about something. But it was interesting, and it's really hard to concentrate on what you're meant to be doing when you can hear somebody saying exactly what they think about a particular moment or a pass or a referee, because you just want to laugh.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, and and how can he tell me, because we're both on air now? So he's like trying to write it down on a bit of paper in front of me. He's like, I can hear Tiernan. I'm like, where? Oh, right, because like I couldn't, so I didn't know what he was on about. So we're 5 minutes into a game, and then again people are scuttling to try and sort this person, sort Jim's headset out without me making it really obvious that we're having issues.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, I think when you're the person in that position, you think it's all sounding terrible. You think it's taken forever and everyone's going to think you're rubbish. And you go and listen back to it, and most of the time it isn't that obvious.
Yeah.
Or it might just sound like a moment of, what? Right. And you move on. So, time can slow down good and bad sometimes when you're commentating, but you just have to keep going.
Yeah.
It's always my advice to anyone, especially when they're starting out. You said the wrong word, just keep going. It doesn't really matter. Unless what you've said is factually wrong, you don't need to say, I'm really sorry.
Yeah, no, you just go past it.
Just go past it. We've been talking here. I'm sure I've ummed and ahed or said something and then corrected it. I haven't broken into tears or a cold sweat. Oh, Joe, I'm really sorry. I said but and I meant and.
Yeah.
Who cares?
No one cares at all.
Who cares?
There is a few people who do care though. Like, I think it's just naturally built into these types of people where they have to leave the comment and correct you. Do you know what I mean? You're like there's no need.
Yeah.
Like, no need at all.
Yeah.
But that's just the way some people are. They just want to be that person. And
yeah.
no,
those people think I support whoever their team's playing as well. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
You're better. You hate. I'm like, funny, last week I was told to support them.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen too often, but it has happened occasionally. There was a cracker one and I used it on social media years ago. I don't actually genuinely, and thank you to everyone listening to this, because I think people are really kind to me and very supportive, and I can probably count on one hand the amount of times I've had any sort of criticism really from anybody. But I remember one time I spoke out about something in a game where I thought there was a big decision that went the wrong way, and obviously the supporters of the team that benefited from the decision were raging with me, and they said, well, not they, that's wrong. One person said, oh, you've always been against us. And I went, that's funny. I'm the same person that stopped your manager being abused by a fan at the end of the game.
Yeah.
Did I hate them then? Oh, I didn't know that. Well, no, you wouldn't, because why would I come online and say it?
Yeah.
So it's that sort of thing, and people find it hard to get their heads around. But it's like professionalism. Genuinely, when I'm working, it's not like, apart from Northern Ireland games where I think everyone can hear it. Yeah. They're like, he's definitely busting Flynn to score. But when it's a domestic match, I genuinely just call it as I see it and try to be fair to everybody. And probably sometimes that means Carrick get a bit more in the neck than they deserve. Yeah. Because I'm trying my best to be fair. But there was a funny one on the radio earlier this season. I'd been saying Carrick 0, Ballymena 0 was one of the worst games of the season. Absolutely awful.
Probably are.
It was just not and did anything happen? Do you remember it? So,
hopefully I was in that.
At Taylor's Avenue, it was a dreadful match, and so there was just nothing going on. Very few chances. The lack of provision for the strikers maybe, and Michael McNamee had, after 5 o'clock, come to me to say, it sounded about as fun as pulling teeth. Michael Clarke's been a character, and I said, Michael, it wasn't that good. And just wee things like that where it's being honest rather than saying, oh, it was a great game, they're so unlucky not to score. There's probably 3 shots and 1 on target in 90 minutes, and some games are just drab, and that's okay. But I
think in this country, those sort of things should actually work more in your favour, where people would get it and be like, do you know what, it was crap, he's just completely right.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Because I think it's insulting to players. I had this conversation. I was actually with one of the women's players, because I did a game and I thought Northern Ireland's women weren't playing particularly well in it, and as a wee while ago, and I'd said as much. I think there should be, there's more to come from them. I wasn't hammering them, but it was but the sort of spirit around women's football is so encouraging, and everybody just is really building each other up. Men definitely hammer each other a lot, and maybe too much.
Yeah.
But the women's games, for the most part, really, really has this like warm feeling around it where everyone looks after each other. They're all first names as well. Commentators are talking about people's first name. So I'd said this, and someone said to me, like, why'd you do that? And I said, well, do you know, my opinion of it is, I know how good you are.
Yeah.
So when you're playing as good as I know you can play, I want to be able to say that, and it means something.
Yeah.
So when you're having a bad day, which you will have, which I will have, which everyone has, if I pretend your bad day was your good day, then it's not authentic, and the compliment doesn't mean as much when it's actually meant.
Yeah, it's false.
It's false.
Why would you want to be perceived as that way too? Though he's just saying that because he wants to fit in.
Yeah.
No, I'm going to be completely honest on the situation. It's the same as men's football.
Yeah.
Women's football should be exact same. If you have an opinion on it and you're watching it and you're playing it and you don't think that people were as good as they have been, say that.
Yeah.
Because
I think it's patronising, isn't it?
It is.
You know if you've had a bad day, and if I come home and go,
100%.
well done today, mate, you were great. You know,
like, I agree, that Carrick game against Balmain was probably a little shit, no? So fine. I was there, probably sitting on the bench this days, but I was still there. Do you know what I mean? But we're the first people who can ultimately agree to that. Like, if anybody asked you after a game, how do you think that game went? You'd be like, 0-0, it was crap. We were upside. They weren't great either. Get it over with, move on to the next one. Like, it's very straightforward.
And I know I mentioned it earlier, but that's what I kind of meant when I was saying about being authentic.
Yeah.
When you're starting off, you're afraid to say anything remotely negative. You want everyone to like you.
Yeah.
It's human nature, but that's not being a good reporter. You have to be objective. So that means saying what's bad as well.
Yeah.
And you pick your moments. I think I am very, how would the right way to put it be? I hold back on criticism so that when I offer it, it means something.
Yeah.
Wow, he really didn't like what he saw there. And it's just to try and have that mean something. If you're always every week shock jocking it and going, this was the worst performance I've ever, he's a disgrace.
Yeah. People get tired of that
People
too.
get very tired of that and they go, well, what does he know? He doesn't like anything.
Yeah. He's just an old grump.
Yeah. So try and find the balance.
One of the other things I want to speak to you about is your co-commentators.
Yeah.
So you've obviously shared the panels with multiple people, celebrities, high-profile players, managers, Sturdy King, Matty Tipton, the lower end of things.
I was waiting for that wee kick.
They were always going to get it. They were always going to get it. But when you do that, how much easier does that make your job? But on the flip side, how much harder can that make your job?
Yeah, a lot harder or a lot easier. And it's different things depending on, I guess, the type of game it is and where the game is in terms of, is it a television match or a radio match? On radio, you need people that can keep talking and people that have a wee bit of
energy,
a wee bit of energy.
Fun. Yeah.
Because if it's a poor game and the person beside you isn't offering much either, it can be a long old day.
Yeah, 90 minutes of hell.
A long old day. And I'm not there to provide the banter, as much as I sometimes have to remind myself that with wee one-liners or whatever. But you want somebody that genuinely just enjoy their company. I think that comes across. If you're enjoying their company, hopefully the people who are listening to the game enjoy being in that company too, and it makes the whole thing a lot easier. So someone that can be serious when they need to, but also understands that it's a game of football, and we should try and have a bit of fun and enjoy ourselves too. So that relationship's important. There's probably nobody that brings the gravitas quite like David Jeffrey, I have to say. And we've a brilliant relationship. Love doing TV games with David. And
his energy towards football in Northern Ireland's brilliant.
He's so positive, and obviously what his team talks are like.
Oh yeah.
He's just a phenomenal orator and someone that really motivates and energizes people, and that is not just footballers, that is everybody he works with. He has that sort of impact. It's very special. So working with David and kind of getting to that place where, you have his respect is, meant a lot to me, because obviously he's a giant of Northern Irish football. And when I was starting out as a Cub reporter, I was terrified of him.
Yeah. So was I when he shouted at me. I was like, he's going to choke me to death here if he gets hold of me.
He's a big man. I'm going to go ask him a tough question and he's going to, what's that?
Yeah.
But he was always very kind, and so working with him, and I always think that I have a unique opportunity working with any of these people to try and bring out a bit more of them than what maybe the person on the street knows. Because I guess the more high profile you are, the more caricature you become almost to people. And so we can take a joke and he can have a wee bit of fun with him, or he can laugh, and he can, he's not always serious, or he's not always like this, he's not always like that. For different people, that's actually really good. I love when people say to me, because I even just interviewing people or having people on podcasts, I've had people say, so I always hated him, and then I listened to him there and he was actually sound. And you're like, they are. That's the whole thing.
And I agree completely. One of the best things about the podcast is being able to show people in the proper light.
Yeah.
People have come on this, spoke about things that I never imagined to speak about, and the amount of feedback that you get, and most of it was Gary Hamilton's, who he won't mind me saying, they were like, I hated Gaz, never liked him, he comes across as this and this, and he speaks about what he spoke about, and the amount of people will be like, I never even remotely thought that would even be the case. And it's highlighting these people's positive sides, like they're not just good people to us. We obviously know them in detail, but to the outside world, the fans, anything like that, I know they've probably got annoyed at one stage because they probably played or managed against them, and they've probably, I don't know, flipped them off or...
Well, that's it. There's people that you hate to play against, but you'd love them in your team.
Absolutely.
And it's a wee bit like that once you start to see that other side. Gary is one of the most switched on football brains ever. I mean, I remember when he was player manager at Glenavon, and he was jogging down to the corner flag to do his warm-up during a match, but he was really just telling his players what to be at.
Yeah.
You know, it's just stuff like that, and you go, he's cute, isn't he? Yeah. Isn't he? And I kind of like that wee craftiness to him, wee cheeky way he had about him. And yeah, brilliant. That's one of the great things about my job is I get to meet the people, talk to them, get to work with heroes. When I started doing the Northern Ireland International Games, I just had to take stock one day when I was sitting with David Healy and Keith Gillespie and Ian Dowie.
Yeah.
Just talking about football. I'm going, I grew up watching you guys. I was in the stands cheering for you guys. And we're sitting here and we're all about to work together. You know, stuff like that. And people all know, go, oh, you see, fanboy or whatever. But you'd be lying to yourself if you, as a Northern Ireland fan, didn't say you felt that way. And that doesn't mean they don't ever deserve criticism. It's not the same thing, but you respect them so much that getting to work with them and getting to meet them and hear stories.
But they would also take that criticism.
Yeah.
Like, they're that type of people where they're not too above themselves either. Do you know what I mean?
People who have been at that level, have played at that standard, have been subjected to way worse criticism than I can say to them in a match day.
100%, absolutely.
So that's the kind of thing that people get wrong. They go like, oh, he doesn't, like, or he won't listen to that. You know, are you wise? No, definitely. It's like, I don't know if people necessarily always realise it, because there's a thing of, oh, they're from here, so you nearly don't realise what you have. It's like Jim Magilton, who's an incredible coach and has worked with all these amazing players and managers and has all these stories, and as a player and a manager worked at an incredibly high level. And then maybe because he's back in Northern Ireland, there's a bit of, hi Jim, yeah.
Yeah, you should be thankful that these people have come back.
Yeah,
they don't have to do this thing. Like, they've probably came back for a reason, whether it's family problems or situations that they needed to be back home and they've taken a job in local football because they want to go back into it. Their standard's probably way above our league, and has been for a long, long time. So while they're here, you should probably try and enjoy these people before you try and just knock them.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And so, like, occasionally you get them as a co-commentator, and then you've got all styles. So some people come with loads of prep. Some people just come and go, just going to watch the game and tell you what I think. Yeah. And as long as what they're saying is decent, you're all right. You know what I mean? There's the odd time you're going,
what's he going to say here?
Whoa. You know, because it's something I wrestle with at the odd time. The co-commentator is the expert. I have not played in the Irish League or further afield. So, you know, I don't think going, well, I was under 17s at Carrick Rangers. Don't think that's really going to cut the mustard. Do you know what I mean? So I think people will be like, wind your neck in. So I tend to not challenge them unless they're wrong maybe about an interpretation of the laws of the game, which is, this is black and white. Whereas if you don't think it's a red card, even if I do, well, that's your view and you've given it. Yeah. And you watching.
I could see Jim just being like,
can I have a different view?
Staring at you being like,
I know. Imagine
just turning back.
Are you serious?
And he'd probably enjoy that though. He'd be like, this is cool. No, mate, this has been fantastic. One of the last things I want to touch on, obviously from my side of things, from the guests that we have that listen to it, is you've done presenting. Yeah. You've done live games, you've done the heap, and you also have a podcast. Mm-hmm. You've been doing the podcast for quite a long time. Yeah. You've had unlimited amount of stars, managers, everyone. Yeah. Talk to me about that.
So the podcast started off as a radio show on Lisburn's 98 FM, and I was the co-host of it. And you know, the really weird thing of it, you probably don't expect to sort of a deep start to this, but the really weird thing of it is the day my granny passed away on my birthday, and I got a phone call from someone to say, can I come into the radio station in a couple of days' time and do my first show, this show? And I didn't answer the phone call because I was in bits. And they left a voice message and I listened to it, and I was told, spoke to family and all, like, you should do it, you know. And so my first ever time being on the score was the day before my granny's funeral. Okay. And it was so tough. Yeah. But for me, it was a case of something to take my mind off things. I could spend a couple of days preparing, and allowed me a wee bit of an escape and to do that. And the program completely changed, because what the score was when it started was all sports.
Yeah.
And over time, I became the main presenter. I started to become more established in the Irish League. I started to see the response we were getting from getting people from our league on. And I went, no, this has to be an Irish League show.
Yeah.
You know, it has to be. So it became that. And I really resisted making it a podcast or anything, because part of my brain was like, this is a radio show. And there were a lot of people saying, well, we can't listen to it. It's on Friday afternoon. I'm in work.
Don't have the time to do it.
So I started to go, right, well, we'll put it up online after. And it honestly wasn't very long before the amount of people that were listening online were overtaking what we thought we were getting for the radio. So we had to start to go, right, this is nearly a different beast altogether. It's a different animal. We need to reshape what we're doing, and we made it more of a podcast that went on the radio than a radio show that went out as a podcast. And nearly got, because it's had loads of different co-hosts and things, but if you listen to it now, it's me and maybe 3 or 4 guests, and they come on and they do their bit, and then it's the next person. So we got to this point because of the pandemic, and instead of being in a nice radio studio sitting opposite having a wee chat, I was doing the call on the phone with somebody, because you couldn't be face to face with anybody, and I was now in my house, which was absolute pain in the backside. Absolute pain in the backside, going, I need to set up a home studio. Hope nobody rings the door. And which happens so many times. Someone rings the door and you go, you serious?
Yeah, kills you.
Kills it. So all these sorts of things are going on. But that was where I nearly stumbled upon this format of nobody, or apart from the Premiership, nobody's getting to play. Why don't I do like a wee check-in with different clubs, different players, different leagues, and we'll just go around talking to people. Just a wee snapshot. Don't come on for an hour. Not everyone has an hour story to tell.
No, it's about 20 minutes, 25 minutes.
Come on, have a wee yarn.
Yeah.
What are you at? Bang. And also, it works the other way too, where if you like one of the guests and not the other one, you can skip one and go to the other. And, you know, everyone has their own opinions, but hopefully you listen to it all. But that was, I'd say it was an accident that's the format. But that is kind of what has clicked. And people will come to me and say, they're really like, you know, what you're doing, sit down, give me an hour with them. When you did an hour with Stephen Baxter, you did an hour with Oran Kearney, we loved that. And you're going, oh, I will do them. But I sort of make them specials.
Yeah.
Just, it's not something I'm moving away from, but I like the ability, because it's a weekly programme that I can just dip in and go, do you know what, Moyola have done well in the Irish Cup. Let's hear about Moyola. Yeah. When did you ever hear about them? Or let's talk about whoever. And you can pick up on where... I remember one time I interviewed a boy I used to play football with as a teenager, because he got chucked in nets for Isla McGee against Cliftonville in the Irish Cup. Right. And he used to be a wee nippy winger guy called Andrew Benson. And the funny thing for me was, I never knew his name was Andrew. He was slick. He was, my whole growing up, he was slick. And we had another coach come in for like a summer camp one year and was like, you know, going through the roll call. Michael Clarke, yeah, here. Andrew Benson. We're like, who's Andrew Benson? And he's like, here. And you're like, is that your name? Right enough. So that was slick. But, you know, all these years later, I'm doing an Irish Cup game, earlier on the Irish Cup, and Slick's in goals. I'm like, when were you a goalkeeper? He's like, I've been doing that for seconds. First choice keeper, one's injured, one's cup tied. I've been chucked in as a third choice to play Cliftonville. Right. And after that game, Joe Gormley brought him into the clubhouse at Cliftonville and had everybody give him a standing ovation.
Very good.
And this is a fella from Carrick who probably had his own ideas about Cliftonville and how welcome he would maybe feel at Cliftonville and all the rest of it. And by the end of it, he's like, what a class club. What a guy Joe Gormley is, which is no surprise to anyone that knows Joe.
Yeah, 100%.
But again, it's one of those amazing things that you hear in football, and I'm getting to have this conversation on a podcast. So it's great. For me, it's an excuse to just talk to people that I'm interested in.
It's very different than most other podcasts, because I would tune in and I would listen to all the varieties of podcasts that we offer. And
yeah.
I think that the one that I do is quite different than the one that you do and the one that somebody else does, because yours is sort of like a mini live update, if you would say, because anything that happens, like the knee, I got chatting to you for a half hour, 45 minutes about the knee and the surgery and what was going to be happening. And then the next week was coming up towards like the Irish Cup build-up. So you were able to get the likes of James Knowles and somebody else talking about their build-up. And then next week it would be a manager talking about their game against Linfield. Mm-hmm. It's all very live, very updated constantly. Exactly. So I would say to anybody who watches this podcast and enjoys this format, it's very different. Yeah. If they are going on to listen to the score and you want to keep up to date with the teams that you're supporting or anything like that, you are definitely the man to be able to provide those live updates for people, because you've got everybody on a hook there. You've got everybody's number at some stage.
I know it's. Thank you for that. No, it's great. It's really interesting, and look, as you know as well, I'll probably put guests off coming on it now when I admit this. You do your 20 minutes or whatever, and then you end up on the phone for another 20 minutes going, what do you have the weekend? How's life? You know, but I genuinely think it's made me a better commentator because I've got to know everybody better. Yeah. And there are Premier League commentators in England would kill for the relationship that I've been able to get with players in this country.
Absolutely.
Because they can only get so close now. Like, I understand that. There's I'm not saying anything disparaging there, but when I am able to go, do you know what? I know what they're maybe going through. I know what's happened to them. Yeah. And I know what's personal and what doesn't go on air, but I know little things that maybe we can share too. And then it stands out and it's memorable. Sometimes people say, like, my dad's coming to the game on Saturday. He hasn't been to the game in ages because he hasn't been well. Yeah. And then that player scores. Yeah. Wow. As opposed to, it's a goal.
Yeah. And then you understand what it means and why they've celebrated so emphatically. And I think that's one of the good things about our league too. It's that small and it's that compact. Everyone does sort of know each other, and the relationships you kind of have with people grow over time. I think that's probably why I kind of went the opposite way in my career, where I was angry as hell when I started out, able to kick people, and then you start to get to know people, you probably don't want to kick them that much anymore, do you know what I mean? So things do ultimately change over time, but listen, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for giving me your time coming on today, mate. I've actually really, really enjoyed that, and the insight to what you do is something that I aspire to get to at some stage, so I really appreciate it.
Sky's the limit, just keep going, and congratulations for making this opportunity for yourself, for carving this all out, and for creating a space for people to come and educate others about the Irish League, but also share their stories and at times unburden themselves too. I don't think it should be taken for granted just how important that probably has been to your guests out so fair play to you, and may you go from strength to strength.
Thanks. Well, listen, we do hugs on the pod, mate. So thank you very much.
Oh man,
really appreciate it, dude. Join us next week on the On The Spot Football Podcast with me, Johnny McMurray, your amazing host. We will have another guest. We'll just wait till next week and we'll let that one come out. See you soon.